fell so deeply in love with technical diving because it kind of really fell into what I love so much about diving, which is being separated from the surface. It's my kind of peaceful meditation type activity. So the further away from the surface I was and the more decompression obligation that I had, the more at peace I felt, right?
Off Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. In the final episode of this series, I sit down and speak with Jon Kieren. I was able to catch Jon before he moved back to cave country in the state of Florida. In his early 20s, a snowstorm pushed him into the direction of the Virgin Islands, which kicked off his diving career. Throughout his career, he has held many positions and has emerged as a true leader in his field. Someone who's not afraid to speak his mind about his frustrations with the industry or personal challenges he has faced. Decisions that led him to change his path, seeking and creating a higher standard, more misconceptions, and some unexpected reactions for speaking up. Please enjoy. Jon, how are you doing this evening?
Quite good. Yeah. Well, I'm just waking up, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Sorry. It's the time zone thing. Sorry. My evening, your morning. Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. I'm really excited to hear your story, hear what you got going on. Obviously have a few questions I'd like to ask. But the first question I usually like to ask is, tell me about how and why you got into scuba diving. Tell me about that first breath. What led to that moment? Was it an aha moment? Was it an absolutely horrible moment? I know it's kind of different for everybody, so tell me all about it.
For sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting with you this morning. Well, my first breaths underwater was just kind of something that me and my dad decided to do kind of on a whim. The company that my dad was working for when I was in high school offered free scuba training to all of their employees. He was a corporate pilot for Land's End. And they said, bring your families. We'd love everybody to get certified, if they want to and whatever. So me and my dad just decided on a whim, sure, let's go ahead and do that. It'll be something fun for the two of us to do when we're on vacations and stuff. And, it was something that always interested me, but I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. It's not a whole lot of scuba diving happening around us, or not that I knew about at the time. And, said, sure, let's go ahead and give it a shot. And it was that first breath underwater that just completely basically changed my life. I didn't know it at the time, of course, really what it would do to the trajectory of my life. But it was, that peaceful, quiet, weightless moment where, those of us who are divers, we know that it's hard to explain, in words what that feels like. And it was just this overwhelming sense of freedom and peace and all that. From that moment on, diving has always been kind of my meditation, if you will. It's kind of my break from reality. And that's always been the most important thing about diving to me. From there, didn't dive much. Being in Wisconsin, and I was really involved in athletics and other school activities and stuff when I was in high school. So didn't really get around to doing much of it. Would go diving, once when I was on vacation with my parents, or, when I was in college and stuff, take a trip to Florida or Mexico or whatever for spring break. And, I would do one day of diving, basically. Always really enjoyed it, but just always had loads of other stuff going on and was never really a priority for me. When I was in my early 20s, I was working in finance in the car business, and I had spent some time sailing around the British Virgin Islands with my sister and her husband. They had a catamaran on Tortola. So I went down and hung out with them a few times. And through that process, really kind of fell in love with the Virgin Islands and met some people down there that became really good friends. And one morning in March of 2008, I woke up and my car had gotten plowed in. We had gotten a big snowstorm the night before. My car was plowed in and I just did not want to deal with digging my car out of the snow or going and sitting in a finance office ever again. And so I called my boss and told him I'm never coming in again. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I have no idea, but I'm thinking about running away to the Caribbean." And that's what happened. I called my buddy who was living in St. Croix, who I had met through sailing with my sister and everything down there. And he said, "Hey, come on down. You can crash in my house as long as you need to, and I've got a spare Jeep laying around that you can drive if you need it." So I booked a plane ticket. I didn't really have many other plans other than that. My flight was going to be in October of 2008. And again, this was March. So I had, basically the summer to figure out how to logistically arrange a move to the Virgin Islands and all of this stuff. And also start thinking about what I want to do while I'm living in the islands, like how do you survive? And I decided I'm not going to, live a normal life down there. I want to have a fun job and just kind of use this as an opportunity to just kind of take a step back and relax and find yourself kind of thing. Right. And I enjoy scuba diving. Let's see what it takes to become a dive master or whatever that is, because every time I went diving anywhere I was, on vacation or whatever, I would always ask the dive master or the instructor, like, how do you end up here? Like, how does this happen? And, well, you just book a plane ticket and then figure it out. And so I thought that's just what you do. So that's what I did. And walked into my local dive shop just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and walked in there. And the guy that I started talking to ended up being a course director. And I said, "Hey, I would like to become a dive instructor. I'm moving to the Virgin Islands in the fall." And he said, "Great. What level certification do you have and how many dives do you have?" I'm like, "Well, I'm an open water diver and I have like 16 dives." And he said, "Great. We have all of these classes lined up, advanced open water rescue. I can put you into a dive master course. And then there's an IDC towards the end of the summer, an instructor evaluation in September, scheduled here in Chicago." And so, okay, well, great. Let's do that. So over the course of a summer, I went from being an open water diver with like 16 dives to an open water instructor. And so I moved to St. Croix as an open water instructor with like 102 dives.
Did you teach at all before you moved? Did you get like any experience actually teaching, or was it just showed up, fresh certification card?
Basically just showed up, fresh instructor rating, thinking, I know everything that there is to know about scuba diving, and, I am the absolute expert. And then the first time, I got in the water with students, I realized I have no idea what the hell I'm doing.
Oh, yeah.
Because all of my training as a dive master and stuff was in, a cold quarry with 8 feet of visibility in Wisconsin. And then all of a sudden I'm on top of a wall. The top of the wall is 40 feet deep, and then, it's 13,000 feet deep or whatever on the other side of the wall, crystal clear water, and I have no idea how to control students in this environment. And so that was a bit of an eye-opening experience, but yeah. So then, moving on, I spent a year in St. Croix working as an open water instructor, doing 2-day open water classes, loads and loads of DSDs, and really enjoyed teaching. Like, I absolutely loved teaching, but I got kind of burnt out from the really fast-paced classes and not really spending a whole lot of time to create good divers. And I was, just kind of getting burnt out and losing kind of that passion for diving. Wasn't doing much, fun diving for myself and stuff. So I decided to look at other opportunities. And I saw the boat captains making a little bit more money than the dive instructors, and kind of living more cush life. Just driving the boat, hanging out in the sun, relaxing while everyone was diving. So I decided to get my captain's license, and I was able to use a lot of sea time that I had from sailing around with my sister and stuff, as well as time driving boats in the lakes in Wisconsin and stuff. So I had a lot of sea time already before getting there, and so had just enough sea time after being down there for about 2 years, a year and a half, to get my 50-ton master's license. So became a captain.
Just real quick, what all goes into, like, what do you need to do? Obviously there's sea time, water time, but what else do you need to do to get a captain's license? Because I know there's different levels. There's the 50-ton and then...
So in the U.S., and St. Croix is a U.S. Virgin Island, so it falls under the U.S. Coast Guard requirements. It's sea time, so it's 360 days, I think, at sea, which is 4 hours basically not attached to the ground is a day at sea, basically. I think is what the requirement is, and you just have captains or boat owners or whatever sign off on your logs saying that you have that time. And then you take a class. You don't have to take the class, I don't think. At least you didn't when I did it. This was, quite a while ago. But the class just prepares you for the written exams. There's no practical application at all. It's all just theoretical and the written exams. You don't ever need to have driven a boat before, basically, to get a 50-ton master's license. You just have to have worked as crew on a boat. Yeah. It's wild. And they don't check to see if you know how to drive a boat during the exams. Yeah. It's time consuming and a bit expensive, but it's really not that big of a deal to get your license. Yeah. It doesn't take that much. Yeah. So got my captain's license and decided, I'm going to live, this nice cush life sitting on the bridge, getting some sun, watching all the people go diving and stuff, and just kind of hang out and relax. I quickly realized that's not what being a dive boat captain in the Caribbean actually is. While everybody's in the water, so everyone knows, while everyone is in the water diving, your captain is probably down in the engine compartment, covered in grease and oil and diesel fuel, trying to get the boat running again so it makes it back to the dock. Usually with zip ties, duct tape, whatever is laying around, spare hoses and hose clamps and stuff to get the boat back to the dock. And it's a pretty stressful job, to be honest, trying to keep the boat running because dive shops, as we all know, are usually running on a pretty thin budget, and especially in remote areas like Virgin Islands and stuff. It costs a lot to maintain these boats, so usually trying to do it on a bit of a shoestring budget. But so I wasn't diving nearly as much anymore, and I was sitting on the boat, not having that much fun. Usually coming home every day smelling like diesel fuel and oil and sweat and grease, which was not so nice. And so I wanted to get back to diving more, but being able to dive more for myself. And so I started looking around at opportunities for that. St. Croix is right on the edge of the Puerto Rican Trench, basically. So we have extraordinarily deep water just off the north shore of St. Croix. The initial drop off on the wall there is just a couple hundred yards offshore and goes down a couple thousand feet. So I had been swimming along the top of that wall for a couple of years, just kind of gazing down, thinking, man, I wonder what's down there. I wonder how, you get down there safely. I did some really, really stupid things, I'll be honest, extraordinarily deep dives on a single tank of air by myself, just because I wanted to try it out, see what would happen. And so I thought, I would like to look into, how to do this, more safely or properly. So I started researching technical diving. There was nobody in the Virgin Islands, whether it was the U.S. or the British Virgin Islands at the time, that was doing any sort of technical diving. It was back in late 2009, early 2010. So I had to look at going elsewhere for training and knowledge and stuff. And basically in the Caribbean, there were only two options at the time. It was Grand Cayman, a dive shop called Dive Tech, or Utila, Honduras. And if you know anything about either of those locations, there's one major difference between the Caymans and Utila, Honduras, and that's cost. The Caymans are outrageously expensive, and Utila is dirt cheap. And so being a broke dive instructor and boat captain in the Caribbean, I went with the cheaper route, of course. And so I rocked up to Utila and had booked 4 or 5 weeks there and went through all of, the entry-level tech training to become, what was the PADI Tech Deep Diver, which is, their deep air certification to 190 feet or whatever it was. And I went back to St. Croix and started doing a whole bunch of solo deep air technical diving because I didn't have anybody to dive with, right? And it was never really the importance of team diving was never really stressed in any of my tech training. So I'm like, I'll just do this stuff solo. It's all good.
So at the time, because obviously, as people are progressing, you don't know what you don't know. At the time, how did you find the training? Was it just all new and exciting and
Yeah.
amazing now? Not really knowing kind of how dangerous it could really be at that point.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, if you look at the typical progression for any scuba training is just like that, right? Like the instructor is the all-knowing master of everything scuba related, and it was the same feeling that I had going into my tech training was, these people know everything that there is to know about technical diving. They must, because Patty or whatever training agency signs their card saying, you're qualified to teach this stuff, so they must know everything that there is to know. So yeah, you go in just with a bit of blind trust. I was 25, 26 years old at the time, just very enthusiastic and ready to absorb information, and just thinking that this is just the way that it is, and it all must be correct. So yeah, did a whole bunch of that diving in St. Croix by myself, had a few really, really scary moments, and realized, if I really want to be doing this stuff, right, I need other people to be diving with. And I fell so deeply in love with technical diving because it kind of really fell into what I love so much about diving, which is being separated from the surface. It's my kind of peaceful meditation type activity. So the further away from the surface I was, and the more decompression obligation that I had, the more at peace I felt, right? Because you have to be in that environment. You can't escape it, right? You're there. And so I knew that this was something that I really wanted to be a huge part of my life. And so I wanted to be able to share that with other people, and I wanted other people to be able to dive with. So decided to go back to Honduras and do all of my instructor training. So the following year, I went back, spent another 4 or 5 weeks in Honduras, and went from being Patty Tech deep diver to Patty Trimix instructor, like their 100-meter, Trimix certification, hypoxic Trimix certification, an instructor at that level. So very, very, very fast paced. And, again, you look at it and think, well, now I come out of that, I am the all-knowing expert, right? Patty has said, or whatever training agency, they have said, you are qualified to teach this stuff. You know as much as you need to know, or as much as there is to know about deep technical diving. So go share it. And so I went back to St. Croix and started teaching it. And again, just kind of found my calling, I think, in teaching technical diving. It was like everything that I wanted out of a career was, sharing this information with others, and doing these deep technical dives with students and stuff was super rewarding to me. But again, very fast paced training. Like the third time I ever went to 300 feet was with students in a Trimix class. Yeah. So yeah, pretty terrifying, right? I had some pretty scary moments happen in class with students. Like I had a student run out of gas on deco from a 300-foot dive, like while we're at 200 feet, running out of their first decompression gas really rapidly. And yeah, some really, really scary stuff. It was not super fun, but good learning experiences, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So just real quick to back it up just slightly, when you started journeying into this technical realm, starting to do the technical diving, you were saying at first you were doing it by yourself. Was it easy to find people to start to dive with you? Did you find, like, do you know what I mean? Was it easy to kind of gather a team and start to progress that way?
Yeah, so super easy. There were a lot of people. Yeah, there were a lot of people in the islands that were interested in it. We just didn't have a way to move forward with it. So as soon as I got my instructor rating, I started teaching classes right away, and started building a technical diving community in the Virgin Islands. And it grew pretty quick. There was a huge demand for tech training in the Caribbean at the time because there wasn't really anybody else doing it. Like again, it was Dive Tech in Grand Cayman, and then Utila. There was some happening on Bonaire and some of the other islands, but not loads. And yeah, so people were looking for another location to train and dive. And so it immediately took off. And now for work, basically, all I was doing was teaching tech and driving the boat,
Oh.
which was exactly what I wanted to be doing. I wasn't teaching recreational classes anymore. I wasn't doing DSDs anymore. I was driving the boat and teaching tech courses, which was really fantastic. From there, just to kind of speed up the, the progression a little bit, in 2012, I was at a technical diving event in Bonaire, actually, I think it was their first like tech week that they did at Buddy Dive in Bonaire, and met the president of TDI there and spent a couple weeks diving with him, and got offered a job in Florida to work in the training department at TDI, and then spent, I guess, about 4 years or so working there, sitting in an office every day again, using like every day off that I had to either dive or teach, like every weekend on the wrecks in South Florida. Started cave diving and really fell in love with that. Like it was even more of that kind of peaceful meditation for me than technical diving had been. So I was either wreck diving in South Florida or driving up to North Florida and cave diving every weekend, and then like every vacation or holiday or anything like that that I had off, I was teaching classes as much as I could. But yeah, I just wasn't really enjoying sitting in an office anymore, and also was getting a little bit frustrated just with the dive industry in general.
When you got that job offer, did you know it was going to be an office job? Were you just kind of looking to get out of the area that you were in? Or was it kind of like sold as one thing and then it became another?
No, I mean it was basically exactly what I had expected. I got to do some really amazing things in that job. Like I was able to do some diving and stuff. I was able to travel around and do like TDI does, like their tech events, their tech weekend type demo events and stuff. And so I traveled around the country doing that kind of stuff. I had some really cool opportunities to train on different rebreathers, like new prototype rebreathers, and help develop standards and training and stuff for those. It really was a really, really awesome job. And I had a lot of really cool opportunities to do all the stuff that, I was promised when I came in. But the majority of it was sitting in an office, and I dealt with all the quality assurance complaints, and I dealt with managing the standards, writing new programs. And I managed the training advisory panel, which is a group of instructors from around the world that all gets together to discuss how to improve things and develop new programs and stuff. So it was a really, really, really cool job. And I saw it as just a huge leap in my career. Like it is, kind of the ultimate goal for a dive instructor to be involved at kind of the highest level in the industry. But after a few years of it, kind of the excitement of that wore off, and I really wanted to just get back to teaching full time and being in the water more. And I realized I could probably have a bigger impact on the industry working with one or two students or instructor candidates at a time, rather than trying to make any big impact from the top down. There's just a lot of pushback from the industry as a whole on really making things better.
Yeah, is that the frustrations you were seeing? Because do you mind if I ask about that? Like, what were some of the frustrations?
Yeah, well, I write about it in that article that was published in depth recently. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the frustrations in the industry, and this is not any specific agency that is more at fault than any other. All of the for-profit training agencies, basically, they're always trying to balance profit and quality, and they're for-profit businesses, so money always wins, right? They have to keep the office open, they have payroll to make. So that it just is what it is. And that was one of the biggest frustrations, was seeing this happening from the top down, and it's almost impossible to make any sort of real change, because anytime you try to improve quality, it's going to cut back on profits, making it more difficult to earn instructor ratings or keep instructor ratings or anything like that. It's going to limit cash flow, of course. So super, super frustrating. But while I was at TDI and teaching some classes and stuff throughout the years, I was introduced to the GUE stuff a little bit. I was always very resistant to it, to be honest, because I didn't believe that all of the standardization and all of that stuff was the answer. I had this assumption that there can't be one way to do everything, like you have to do things differently in a cave than you do it in an ocean. Like there's just no way that one way works for everything from, open water diving to long range cave exploration to deep wreck diving on rebreathers and stuff. Like there just has to be variations. But I had the chance to work with a few students at higher levels like cave or rebreather training or deep technical diving that had some GUE training in the past. So like I would have a cave student who had taken fundamentals, or a tech student who had taken fundamentals or something like that. And the thing that struck me the most was every class that I taught with GUE trained divers, those classes were way more fun to teach and way easier to teach because they came in just with a significantly higher level of knowledge, understanding, and skill. So we got to start technical diving or cave diving on day one, instead of spending 3 days just trying to, teach them how to float and kick. So I wanted to know a little bit about what that process was like. Like, how do you create such a consistent product? So I decided to take a fundamentals class just to try to steal as much as I possibly could. And to offer to my students, like, okay, here's how we actually set people up for success. And it was the first day of the lecture, like the second or third slide in the PowerPoint presentation, where I just said, oh, like, this is it. This is something that's completely different. It fixes all of the problems that I see in the dive industry. And my career has just taken a new path. And it's going to be a very time consuming and expensive process, but I think it's worth it. And the big differences with GUE is it's a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to conservation and exploration and education, right? So those are the main focuses. Of course, the organization needs money to run, right? But most of that is donations and stuff, as most nonprofit organizations run. So, like, there's not this push to print certification cards or to issue instructor ratings or anything like that. It's dedicated to making sure that we're offering the highest quality education possible to create passionate divers that are going to be involved in conservation and exploration efforts. So it's just a completely different mindset. It kind of fixes this disconnect that we have between like the passion of diving and the education component. Because every GUE instructor we need to be active. We need to be passionate about diving still, have to be requalified pretty rigorously. And we have to meet a lot of much higher standards for recertification and renewal and everything every year. So,
and to my knowledge, that's the only agency that does that, correct? Am I correct in that assumption?
I wouldn't say the only one. There are probably some smaller fringe agencies that do have actual renewal requirements and stuff, but of the larger organizations, GUE is definitely the one that has, the highest standards for renewal and requalification. Specifically, every year, we have to do fitness tests and, have diving medical and fitness tests are like swims. We have to carry heavy equipment for certain periods of time. We have to do, the tired diver toes and all that kind of stuff. And it's pretty relatively high level of fitness that we have to meet. We have to be actively diving, so we have to, do at least 25 non-training dives. Half of those have to be at our highest teaching level, and so I think 25 dives a year isn't that much. But for somebody that's actively teaching a lot, in order to fit in 25 non-training dives, it can be a little bit not difficult, but you have to really want to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, which means, people are actively involved in diving if they're going to be teaching them. And then on top of that, other renewal requirements, like we actually have to be requalified every 4 years. So we have to be reevaluated by an evaluator, a higher level instructor, trainer, evaluator. And then nobody's exempt from that. So even the evaluators have to be evaluated by other evaluators. Nobody gets out of any of those requirements. So it just ensures that everybody is constantly teaching at the highest level. And we have opportunities continuously to kind of correct the drift that happens. As humans, we're always looking for small shortcuts and stuff to take to be more efficient. And so, it happens to all of us where, we cut certain things out of lectures to make them more efficient. And, when that happens, we're like, okay, well, the class still ended up being okay, and people are still prepared and everything. And then You cut a little bit out of the land drill once to make it a little bit more efficient, and then the next day or the next class you teach, you do the same because it turned out okay, and everybody does that. But these requalifications are opportunities to correct that and reset that drift. So, and again, everybody is susceptible to it, so we make sure that everybody gets requalified.
So I was speaking to you a little bit off recording, and I've kind of said it a couple times on the podcast. But yeah, no, I recently just, as of like 3 months ago, took my first GUE course, and definitely kind of the same. I think maybe when I first started hearing about the agency, I kind of had the same perception going in, like, oh yeah, I just, that's not something that I want to do. I don't even think I was really like wanting to move forward in technical diving. Always sounds appealing, obviously, but I was just kind of happy where I was. And then as I start progressing, my own personal scuba education, there's like things that start sounding more appealing, like, oh, okay, hearing about how they do that. And so I definitely, before I took the course, I had a lot, and I just took the fundamentals course, but I had a lot of misconceptions going in, to the point where I was literally, I felt bad because so usually if I find an instructor, I'm like, okay, I pre-warn them, like, hey, I'm gonna just be prepared. I'm gonna ask a lot of questions. There's gonna be a lot of questions coming your way, because I know. I mean, obviously, I think, well, if a lot of people don't know, there is the standard equipment that GUE uses, right? So I'm like, okay, I need to get everything proper before I go into class. And I was talking to the instructor, and I'm like, man, I'm feel really bad. Like, I don't really have an area where I can go dive, and I'm like, I can go to a pool and start practicing stuff. And she's like, no, you're good. You you're good. Just show up to class. Like, you read what you need to read.
That's what the class is for.
But that was one of the misconceptions, though, was because, at my local lake in Texas, when you see like the GUE crowd, they're constantly out there, and in my head, I don't know if I misread it, but I'm like, oh, they're prepping for class. They're going out every weekend and they're prepping for the class that they're going into.
Yeah.
But I might have just read that wrong. I don't know if that's exactly what they're doing, because I only met a few, I think, GUE people. I probably know like 5 or 6 back home. So I went in with tons of misconceptions, and I swear, like, I'm pretty sure it was day one. The thing that blew my mind the most, still to this day, was like, I thought I knew how to set up a back plate and wing. Like, I thought I knew how to do it. I'm like, oh man, I know how to do it. And then the instructor was telling me like the exact opposite of how I was, told, or how I had it in my head. And I'm like, how is this going to work? Like almost not believing it, but I'm like, go with the class. It's just how I am in classes. And it was just like mind blowing when I was in the water, like just a light bulb moment. And it was absolutely amazing. But one of the questions that I wanted to ask you as a GUE instructor, because I've been asking a few, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that you will hear about, or students will have before, or like when they approach you to take a class, or even if you're just talking to some, random person that just heard about the agency, like, oh, this is what I heard?
It's almost too hard to list them because there's so many. To be honest, like it's the issue is you have a lot of people who have never taken a GUE class who look at it from the outside, who feel a need to put it down, right? And so people who ask questions about it to people who don't actually know, they'll just start loading up with wrong ideas, basically. And so things like, oh, you have to wear halcyon equipment, and you have to wear scuba project fins, like all this stuff. It's like, no, none of that is true. You can wear whatever manufacturer equipment you want. I'll give my suggestions, right? Because halcyon equipment is some of the highest quality equipment you can buy, right? So I'm going to suggest that. But not only is it high quality, it's designed to do exactly what we do. The wings are designed to hold the tanks, right, in the proper position, right, for trim and balance and all that stuff. And, scuba project fins are kind of the standard that we use because they're heavy and they're the proper shape, and they allow us to do all the kicks and everything that we do properly. So, I explain that to students, but tell them, you can show up with whatever gear you want. right? As long as it meets our standard equipment requirements, which is not brand specific at all. So that's usually the biggest one the brands. Also, people come in thinking that it's going to be this like super hardcore militaristic style training because the standards are extraordinarily high. Like compared to the rest of the dive industry, especially at the fundamentals level, those standards are extremely high. And so people associate that with some sort of like hard militaristic type training. That's not the case. I mean, there are some instructors, of course, that teach more that way, right? Because everyone has different teaching styles and different personalities and everything. But the vast majority of GOE instructors are far more laid back. We're focused on communication styles and how to get through to different types of students based on their learning styles. And we spend a lot of time working on different teaching techniques to help support students' needs at different ability levels and everything. So that's one of the things that shocks most of my fundamental students, I think, is the level of attention that we put into communicating with students in a way that works best for them, right? And other stuff, other common misconceptions is that it's this very kind of cultish mentality where you have to do things the way that we do it, otherwise you're ostracized from the community and stuff. And it's not like that at all. Like the community is actually super warm and welcoming, and we're looking to improve quality, of course, but most importantly, we're looking to have fun. Like this is just scuba diving. Our goal is to go dive and have fun. And it's that you had a common perception of GUE teams or GUE communities of looking at it from the outside and thinking these people only go and dive to train to prepare for classes and stuff. And while quarries and lakes and stuff in Texas and the Midwest, where there's not a whole lot new to look at every weekend when you're going to the same place, they're going to spend time practicing skills to make sure that they're fresh. So when they go to do tech dives or cave dives or take the next class, all of those fundamental skills are still fresh and it's not going to cause problems for them. So yeah, you do see GUE teams practicing a lot, but it's one of the things that I try to discourage my students from the most. Once they get done with the fundamentals class, it's like, all right, guys, like you need to keep practicing skills, but go diving for fun. Like use the skills that you've learned here and go have fun. Like don't just get in the water to practice. Go have fun, right? At the end of your dive, do a valve drill, or do an S drill or whatever. But spend most of your time in the water actually diving and having fun, and that's going to be the best way to practice, the foundational skills that you've learned. So those are some of the bigger misconceptions. I think most of the time is just that cultish type mentality that a lot of people perceive, or this really hardcore like militaristic type training and the equipment requirements really get a lot of people. And also a lot of people think that like we just do things the way that we do them because that's the way that they've always been done. And so when I have a student that ahead of time says, I'll have a lot of questions. I love that. Like those are our favorite types of students most of the time because like that's what creates the best conversations, right? Let's talk about the why behind all of this. And people are usually a little bit taken back by the detail that we actually put into all of the equipment requirements and our standardized equipment kit, because there is a very specific reason for why we do everything, right? And at the fundamentals level, it's not all relevant. Why we put our SMB in our left pocket versus our right pocket, and why the long hose comes from the right post and stuff. For the most part, at the fundamentals level, most of it doesn't really matter that much. But when you move on to higher levels, it all becomes super, super critical. Not just for safety, but to make things easier. Like why we stow our primary light the way that we do when we go to deploy an SMB is the same way that we're going to stow our primary light when you do a gas switch or doing something else where you don't need your light. So it's that precision and the reason why that we try to explain in detail at the fundamentals level. But we understand like the vast majority of our students are not going to remember every little detail, right? There's so much new information coming at people at the fundamentals level that it's really, really difficult for people to absorb all of it and remember all of it. So I try to tell all of my students, like, just remember there is a specific reason why. If you don't remember, right? If somebody asks you, just say, I don't remember why. It wasn't relevant at the fundamentals level, but it becomes relevant at Tech 1 or Cave 1 or whatever the case is, because that's one of the things that you see a lot on dive boats and dive shops and stuff is people challenging new GUE divers and trying to like pick holes in what we do and find flaws in it. And, then they can, go back to the dive shop and talk a bunch of crap about how, GUE just does things the way that they do it because whatever, or they have to wear halcyon gear. And that's where you see a lot of those misconceptions coming from is people are not knowledgeable about it, asking questions specifically to poke holes in what we do. And then them getting bad information because a brand new GUE diver doesn't necessarily have all of those answers. So they can go and talk a bunch of crap about how GUE doesn't actually know what they're doing or whatever. It's pretty frustrating.
Oh, I can imagine. So, but no, there was just a lot of moments throughout the class, and the one of the biggest things was, so my girlfriend, she got certified earlier this year. And so I suggested that, like, hey, we should go take a fundamentals class. It's a class that I've wanted to take for a long time, just because, as another thing that I kind of heard going in is it's like, it's such a great place to test your skills and see where you're at and see what you need to improve on, see what, like, okay, no, you're good here, but we can work on this and that. One thing that I kind of was a little bit on the fence of, and it was actually a thing that I definitely needed to work on throughout the course, was when I was talking to my girlfriend about it, I was like, hey, we should go take this course since we're going to be diving together. We should learn how to be a better team, right? Like we should learn how to work together, better. So that way, she's just started earlier this year. I've been diving a little bit longer than her. So, but I'm like, let's just go and take this course. And that was a thing that I was like asking the instructor, like, oh, like, are we going to have to take a separate course? Because, like, can we all be in the same course together, and it's actually a pretty amazing thing to see how an instructor can take three different people on completely different levels. And by the end, it's like a functional team, right? Sure. Like it's such a mind blowing thing, obviously, because I'm just the kind of industry standard recreational instructor. I haven't taught in a little over a year. I think it's been like a year and a half now, but I still enjoy that aspect of it. And I'm just like, how are they going to approach this? Like, this is like, like to me in my head, I'm like, this would be just an absolute kind of a nightmare of a situation. And it was like flawless and like it was so good. And I learned, I'm like, okay, I could be a lot better of a team player in the water. And I remember at one point she kind of pointed out, she's like, yeah, there's everybody here, and then you're just kind of like off doing your thing. And I'm like, it's such a mind-blowing thing to the point I actually started opening up a conversation with her and started learning. I'm like, so what does it take to become a GUE instructor? And then oddly enough, the article, I think we took it in October and that article came out in November. Yeah. Right? Is that correct? Yeah. And it, like, that's why it was just really, there was a lot of points in that article where I'm like, man, this is all true. It's just speaking to me right now. And I even, was like talking to my girlfriend about it, like, man, should I try to pursue this? Because, and I'm still in conversation with her because I'm like, yeah, this is something, what I like about it is, and I even told her, I'm like, if this is something that I pursue, like, this would probably be like a 2+ year process, because I would need to take courses, build up the skill levels, but it appeals to me in a sense that it's a, I don't want to say a long-term goal, to work for, but long-term, 2 years, but there's just a lot of things because kind of like you're saying, like you have to not change your lifestyle. That's not the correct way to put it, but it's something that, I want to do more things in scuba, because that was the other thing. I didn't really know that there was this whole recreational side of GUE. Yeah. So I was like, oh man, this is kind of appealing, because I don't know if I'd ever want to teach tech. I'm just still dabbling, learning the technical side. So I'm just like, but I do love introducing people, giving them that first breath underwater, seeing that moment, right? Like I love that so much. It was one of my favorite things as an instructor. So I was just like, man, maybe I can go towards like a Rec 1. But yeah, either way, it appealed to both of us so much that the instructor, I think at some point, I'm meeting back with her in March to try to upgrade to the tech pass.
Mm-hmm.
But me and my girlfriend have been talking about like, hey, we should go take a Rec 2 course because
Yeah.
she's offering one. And I'm like, yeah, like let's go take it together. It'd be fun. We could take the course together. And even though it's like a recreational course, and in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, it's probably going to be easy. I'm like, dude, I'll probably learn so much. I don't want to say I was like neglected in the past with my previous instructors, nothing like that.
Yeah.
But I just know going into a Rec 2 course, I would learn a vast amount of information that just the whole backplate thing blew my mind to the point where I was like, what else can you teach me?
Yeah. For sure. For sure.
What else?
Yeah, you made a lot of good points there. There's so much that we don't know, right? And so I never blame or look down on instructors in the industry outside of GUE because I know where they're coming from. They've only been taught what they've been taught, so they can't really know. I don't want to say any better, but they can't really know any different, right? It really is, I think, the agency's responsibility to look at growing and passing that information down. And it just doesn't happen within most organizations, right? So you don't know what you don't know. And you show up for, a fundamentals class, you're like, holy crap, that's how you set up a backplate, and then you get in the water with it and you're like, wow, this is the easiest thing in the universe to dive when I used to fight against it, right? And there's so much of that along the way. And along my own path through GUE, it's been those massive eye-opening moments just continuously over and over and over again for the last 6 years. And I was at the head of one of the largest technical training agencies in the world, right? And an instructor trainer for every level of cave and technical and rebreather training and stuff. And coming in just feeling like, oh man, I have missed somehow so much really critical information. It's not just making my life safer, my diving safer, but it's making my diving easier and way more fun, right? And it's like, holy crap, how do we miss all these really simple basic things? Because none of it is really complicated. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't really understand about GUE, or they have this misconception about GUE, is we take everything that we possibly can and just simplify it, right? Like as much as we can to make it easy to execute and easy to reproduce consistently and everything. So, like my decompression lecture for technical classes went from like 3 hours now down to about 45 minutes because we just simplify. We tell you the information that you need to know based on the level that you're going to be diving, and then this is how we apply it practically, right? So it's whether it's at the fundamentals level or becoming a Cave 1 or a Cave 2 instructor, like it's those moments that just keep me not just honest with myself, but also passionate about the learning experience, right? Where it's like these eye-opening moments. Oh man, that's going to make my life so much easier. Thank you for teaching me that, right? Like, and it happens over and over again and continues. So also the point about being able to bring divers together from different levels and backgrounds in diving at a fundamentals level, and it's one of my favorite things about fundamentals classes. We're always looking at changing class structure and how to make it more appealing to a wider variety of people. So there might be some changes coming at some point about how we structure a fundamentals class with people from different levels and stuff. But I really enjoy the way that it is currently structured to be able to take a cave instructor, right, and somebody in a brand new diver who's never been in a backplate before, and then somebody who might have some tech or cave diving experience, and put those people all together in a class and watching them basically have to start all over, for the higher level divers, right, and kind of dive down to the level that the newer divers are diving at. And the biggest struggle for them is working to support the newer divers. And so it's just this really, really interesting dynamic to watch, and everybody is being pushed to grow and learn at whatever level they're actually diving at. So like the cave instructor, right, learns how to become a better cave instructor by being part of that fundamentals class. So yeah, it's a super, super cool process to watch.
I was very, very much impressed, which is it's so funny because I was for years just kind of like reluctant towards it, like, I'm fine. And I mean, I get it, you know, but the funny thing is, and obviously I haven't met every single GUE instructor out there. I've interviewed a few on the podcast already, and spoken to some others, but I don't see this like big ego. I feel like the people that I meet, the more usually the more experienced they are, the more humble.
Yeah,
Like they're not the egos aren't there, you know,
yeah,
like
for
it's
sure.
kind of those like newer up and comer divers that are like, I just took the course, you know, like kind of like you were explaining earlier, like I'm God's gift to earth, right? And it's like I just meet some of these people and I'm like, man, you've done some really cool stuff. You've done some amazing stuff, but you know, we're just shooting the shit right now,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
just it's just kind of weird, but no. So it's been fun, this little series I'm trying to put together to reach out and speak to some instructors just to kind of hear different aspects, especially from different parts of the globe.
Yeah,
But it's all seamless into where it's like we're, you know, they're just kind of out to teach and let people have fun. It's just weird because, like I said, there was just kind of a had a lot of misconceptions
yeah,
going
yeah.
in. So
It is basically the complete opposite of what most people think it is, which I find to be rewarding about the experience of teaching a fundamentals class is showing people that like this is not what most people make it out to be, right? And I think the level of focus and attention that we're putting into the recreational programs is really fantastic. If you would have asked me 13 years ago if I would ever teach another open water class again, like I would have told you absolutely not. Like I'm not interested in it. And as soon as I became fundamentals and Rec One instructor, I had an opportunity to teach a Rec One class, and it was like, holy crap, might actually be my favorite class ever to teach because it's how open water diving should be taught. Like it's a 5 or 6 day class. You spend loads of time in the pool, working on skills and everything, focusing again on buoyancy and stability first. And then, by the end of the class, you have basically brand new open water divers that are diving at a rec pass, fundamentals rec pass level is generally what we see. By day 3 in the pool, students are basically flat and neutral deploying SMBs, in the shallow end of the pool. And it's like, holy crap, like, how is this possible? In my Rec 1 classes, I give people a lot of time to just swim around and practice. I feel like that's really important for people to have an opportunity to play, to reinforce the skills that they've learned. And I told one girl, all right, we've got like an hour left in the pool, so just do whatever you want to do. I'll just float around here and watch you practice or play or whatever you want to do. And she literally just back kicked around the circumference of the pool for the vast majority of that hour, just giggling like an idiot and having a blast. It was just so much fun. Yeah, so it's super, super cool to see people actually learn how to dive properly from the beginning and not learn those bad habits of being overweighted, kneeling on the bottom, and focusing on more complex skills first, and then spending just a little bit of time on the buoyancy. Instead, we reinforce that foundation and make sure that platform is solid before we start task loading and stuff. And it makes all the difference in the world. The level of confidence and competence that they come out of that class with.
So I do have, because I mentioned the article a little bit earlier, a question that I have about that is, was that something that you just kind of wanted to get that information out there, or was it just kind of like what prompted you to want to write the article?
Well, there's been a couple of articles that I've written for In Depth that I thought were really important, and the first one was actually about a year ago, I guess, about record-setting dives, right? And I wrote an article called "I Trained Doc Deep," and Doc Deep was a guy named Guy Garman who unfortunately died attempting to set a world record for depth a few years ago. The idea for the article actually came out when In Depth released an article about a record-setting dive that had just been done, and I wanted to make sure that people understood what issues there are with these record-setting dives, and it's important for us as educators and those higher at the top of the industry to be honest with people about how they should progress to making bigger dives and stuff. One of my, one of the saddest things about my career, right, is that I trained duck deep, very, very fast paced. Like he was one of my first tech students when I was down in the Virgin Islands. And, I have a lot of regrets about how that happened and not putting the brakes on him sooner, but I didn't have that level of knowledge and experience to understand how to do that. So that article was really important to me and got a lot of really good feedback and stuff. And I was really happy that I wrote it. It's probably the hardest thing that I've ever wrote. Very, very emotional, but super happy that I put it out there because I just felt it was really, really important for people to see my side of it, basically. And then the other one, the recent one about why I became a GUE instructor, was kind of the same. I was, just kind of frustrated with things that I've been seeing in the dive industry lately. And Michael Menduno, who's a close friend and everything, who's the editor for In Depth as well. My wife, SJ, also works for In Depth. She's the art director. And so they're always in my ear about, we want you to write an article, think of something. And the idea of why I became a GUE instructor came up. And I thought, okay, let's let's do this, right? Let's have a chat. And it just kind of evolved from there, and kind of spilled beans a little bit about the frustrations that I really saw in the industry. And I talk pretty openly about it with people that ask me in person, and I include a lot of that information in some of my classes, and especially instructor training that I do with other agencies and stuff. And so I figured, what the hell, we'll just put it out there and see what happens. And yeah, a lot of really, really good feedback. Like I got messages from people at the highest level in the industry, from instructor trainers and open water divers that I had never met before. Like literally brand new divers also came to me, and with the same kind of feedback that you had. Like, this really spoke to me. This is exactly what I saw in my entry level classes. And then tech instructors being like, these are the frustrations that we've had with the agencies and stuff. And even regional office managers from the agencies, so people that actually work for the agencies, actually reached out to me and like, thank you for putting this out there. We're trying, but we know that there's all of these obstacles. So we're thankful that it went out there. So yeah, it struck a chord with a lot of people, I think, and it's had almost entirely positive feedback. A little bit of backlash from the agencies, unfortunately, that didn't appreciate it as much. Got suspended from one training agency for it. Still waiting to find out exactly why. There's been some communication back and forth, but very, very vague, and not no conclusions made. The suspension actually happened while I was in the water teaching a class, and nobody notified me that I had been suspended.
Oh,
yeah. So it put me at a lot of risk, liability wise and stuff, which was not good for me. Had something happened with the student in the water, it would have been really, really, really messy. And I didn't find out that I had been suspended until I tried to register the students at the end of the class. Yeah. And it said you don't have the ability to register because you're not active. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not good. Nobody notified me until, and then it was DEMA. And so there was a lot of talk about it all at DEMA and stuff. And, after DEMA, I got around to getting in touch with the agency and trying to sort it all out. But there's been very little progress and not a whole lot of communication about the why, and so, why we skipped all of the, standard quality assurance measures and stuff and just flipped the switch. So it definitely created an interesting situation.
Oh yeah. I mean, I feel like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess there's a few ways to look at that, but, I mean, obviously, cause like I said, with the article, it did strike a chord, and obviously it did to certain people to have that happen, because I mean, that's definitely, because there is a lot of truth in that article. And what's funny about it is, you like these ideas, you kind of know that these things are happening, they're just kind of floating around, but then like you're like, boom, here's an article that is saying it, then you're just like, what, this is true. Like, it's kind of not an unspoken thing, but it is. Yeah. So And there is a lot of changes that definitely need to be made. And I just had a roundtable about risk management and
Yeah.
accident analysis, and it's pretty wild to hear, the certain individuals trying to push to make these changes in the industry, but there's such a pushback
Yeah.
from the agencies for, at the end of the day, probably like you were saying earlier, just it goes against profits.
Yeah.
Like if we do this, we're losing profits, so we can't move forward. And if people were actually in the water more instead of the one quote, I can't remember exactly how it goes, but just like these higher ups going in the water once a year for social media posts or something
Yeah.
like yeah, it's really wild. But I mean, I think it was a really good article. I'm sorry to hear that happened, especially mid session. That must have,
Yeah.
yeah, that must have not been the best feeling in the world.
It was shocking to say the least. Like I'm not really surprised that there was issues at the agency level with the article. I kind of expected that, but the way it happened was absolutely shocking. Like, yeah, just quite unprofessional if you ask me, and just a little bit vindictive. But that is kind of the industry. When they feel a little bit of pushback, it's nope, we're done, discussion over, like just get out of here kind of mentality. And it's like that's exactly what I'm talking about in the article. Like let's let's move forward, right? Let's talk about, okay, how do we improve? How do we make this better, instead of just you're done, we don't want to hear it, like just get out of here. You're gonna, anything that we try to do that's associated with any of that is just going to take money out of our pockets, and it's not worth our time to discuss it. So
That's a bummer, man. And the Doc Deep article, so I did read that, I believe, when it came out.
mm-hmm.
And so that was another thing that I definitely wanted to mention and say, that it, for a person of your level to like admit that mistakes were made is a huge thing. And I kind of like that had to have taken a lot. So that was for you to like put that out there. So, thank you, because it, makes me reflect on like, okay, I know I've made mistakes. Like, let's try to prevent those from going forward. So no, the article is really, really good. And I mean, the GUE, or why I became an instructor, was really, really good too. So, man, your articles are just hitting home, dude.
Well, good. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, with the Doc Deep one, like I'm generally very open and honest about mistakes that I make and stuff. Like I think it's the most important aspect of learning and improving is first, understanding where you've gone wrong in the past, and trying to correct that. Right. So, in personal life and in diving and everything, I find that to be extremely important. So most of my classes, I talk a lot about ways that I've screwed up in the past, and it's always been, I feel like a super valuable experience for my students, looking at, their rebreather instructor who has forgotten to pack their scrubber and started a dive, right? Like that hits, pretty hard for most students. It's like somebody with thousands of hours on a rebreather can make that simple of a mistake and almost kill themselves like that. People wake up a little bit and listen more to what you're trying to tell them. The big exception to that was always the Doc Deep stuff. It was just such an emotional thing for me. Anytime the thought came into my head, it was, just like shut it down, tune it out, and move on with your day type of thing. And people would, for years there was loads of buzz about that event, and a lot of negative commentary and stuff, not just about, the dive and the things that led up to the dive, but also about Guy as a person. And that was the hardest stuff for me to hear, because he was one of the most amazing people I ever met. Like, he was truly and sincerely a great friend, and truly just remarkable human being. Yeah, he just got focused on the wrong thing, and was not stopped from making a really, really bad mistake. So yeah, I just wanted to get that information out there finally, to get it off my chest, but also, hopefully somebody else who is on the same path might see that, or people who are supporting someone who is on that same path maybe takes a second look at it and think, I see some similarities here. Maybe we need to do something different. So hopefully it helps a little bit.
Oh, I'm sure it did, but no, that takes a lot, man. So that's, I coming from me, like I appreciate to see things like that because I mean that's that's like true leadership qualities, man, to admit your mistakes and move forward, because it's not an easy thing to do, and let's face facts, a lot of people don't do that. A
Yeah.
lot of people will not admit, that things that so last question, last couple questions
Sure.
I have for you. So you're about to make a big move.
Yeah. Moving back to Florida. Excited about it. I've been in Mexico for 5 years now, and I've never lived anywhere for longer than 5 years. So didn't really think a whole lot about the exact timing of it until we made the decision to move. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's been about 5 years, so it's time to move on and do something different. Mexico is great for the most part. The diving here is phenomenal. I really enjoy teaching here because days are pretty laid back because all the cenotes are within a couple minute drive of the dive shop and stuff, and the community here is great and everything. It's just time to move on. It's getting a bit sad here in Tulum with the really, really rapid development that's happening. Every day you drive back into the jungle and there's more and more piles of trash and more jungle that's cleared out for condos and stuff. Like the dive sites that used to be way back in the jungle are now, surrounded by condo developments and stuff. It's sad to see how rapidly it's happening and how little time and effort is put into, looking at the ecological impacts of what we're doing now with the train and the airport and everything. I had to move on. Like it's really, really difficult morally for me to bring more people here to train and dive when I know how much destruction is happening as a result of it all. That was a big contributing factor. And to be honest, while the diving here is pretty, I much prefer Florida cave diving, and most people will, be like, "Oh, that's crazy." Florida caves. There's all this flow. They're deeper. The water's a little bit colder. There's nothing pretty to see because there's no formations and stuff. But it's the slightly colder water, the high flow, and the depth that really attract me to it. Because again, my reason for being underwater is not necessarily to look at the pretty things, which while they're pretty, that's a bonus. For me, it's the challenge and the separation from the surface, basically. And I really, really miss doing a lot of deep, long-range diving. And we just don't have a whole lot of that here in Mexico. There's only a couple of sites where you can get deeper than 30 meters or so, or 100 feet. And I miss the dives with 5-6 hours of decompression and that kind of stuff. Like those are the dives that really get me excited and kind of scratch that itch for me. So. I dive with the KUR group in Florida, or I did a lot of diving with them and have done a little bit over the years just when I go back to teach and visit and stuff. But I'm really, really looking forward to getting back involved with KUR and getting involved with more of the exploration projects and stuff that are happening there. So yeah, we're moving in a couple of weeks. It doesn't feel like it because we're nowhere near being prepared for a major move. It's just like, craziness of teaching, the holidays and all that. I'm like, oh crap, now all of a sudden you have to pack up and move to another country. So it's a bit challenging. We'll get through
it. Which part of Florida?
We'll be right in High Springs, so north central Florida, like in the middle of all of the caves, basically. Our house is 5 blocks from the dive shop that I teach out of and stuff. So we're pretty excited.
Oh, awesome. Well, no, man, that's good luck with the move. That sounds exciting. I've never been diving in Florida. It's a destination which a lot of people from Texas would make it over there. I just never made it over there. But yeah, I'll definitely, I always keep saying I'll make it to Florida one of these days. Well, back to Florida, I should say, because I've been there a couple of times. Cool, man. Yeah. Well, the last question I wanted to ask you, that I usually always kind of ask that advice question at the end of the podcast is, and I try to figure out a different way to ask people just because kind of based on the conversation. And I think you've kind of said everything throughout the podcast, but what advice would you have for I don't want to say a new diver, but maybe a diver that's thinking about moving into the technical world,
Sure.
moving into just deeper, longer dives? What advice would you have for that person?
So number one, take fundamentals, of course. But more importantly than that, I think is be inquisitive, ask questions, and don't be afraid to reach out. I love it when people reach out to me and just ask for advice on what to do next. Like even if they're not going to be coming to me for classes or whatever, like I might give them advice that pushes them in another direction, right? And I'm perfectly happy to do that. So, and most, high level instructors feel the same. Like we want to share information. So if you're questioning things, if you don't know what to do next, or, you're just kind of feeling lost in the sea of information that you find, on social media or scuba board or whatever it is, reach out to the people that you think have some answers for you, and don't be afraid to make that contact, because most of us are more than happy to share it. And you get a lot better information than you will if you type a question on scuba board. You don't know who's sitting on the other side of the keyboard, and as much as they talk about their experience and stuff, it's not always the right information that you'll get. Sometimes there is good information on those types of forums and on Facebook and stuff, but you have to know how to weed out the bad information. And somebody that doesn't know what they don't know, they don't necessarily know how to sift through it all. So don't be afraid to ask those questions, and don't be afraid to take a step back to be able to make a more efficient path forward for yourself. I try to be as honest as I can with people, like people that want to sign up for, like a trimix class or a high level cave class or something, and I don't see, that they have the right structure from the beginning, or, that solid foundation that's laid. I try to be as honest as possible and be like, I would love to teach you a DPB cave class. It's one of my favorite classes to teach, but I don't think you're ready based on, having missed these few steps at the beginning. So don't be afraid to take a step backward to make a more efficient path forward. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and sign up for a fundamentals class.
Awesome. Well, Jon, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thank you so much for having me. And hopefully we'll talk soon.
Off-gassing, a scuba podcast.